and watching council last night, but it was a great presentation of the new parks plan update. And I think the last one was done by Jamie Houston.
It was actually, sorry, Harriet, it was actually done in 2009. It was done internally by Ian Kilgore and Beverly Hillier.
Ah, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Was that a public forum?
That was like an update to the existing parks plan that was there. The reason that it was done, from my understanding, is that we were going through another operational review and they needed to have an update in order for that to be consistent. So instead of going through the consultation process and going through that, they did it internally in order to do more of an inventory of what we had to be able to add that to the operational plan.
Okay, good to know. Well, our women can do a lot of walking, and we're noticing that there's some changes in the parks around town. We see the new basketball courts going up at what was supposed to be at one time what was it called? It was a berm for public
the amphitheater
concerts. Yeah. So no, I'm glad to see it getting used for something, you know. And also where there are pickleball courts, outdoor courts, right, being constructed. So this morning we have Johanne Brousseau and Bryan Kimber from our counselor and staff from Parks and Leisure. Is that right, Bryan?
Community growth and development, but yeah, it's you can call it Parks and Leisure. That works for me too. Okay.
That's a new title then, eh?
Yeah, it's technically it's arts, culture, and recreation services. Yeah.
Okay, there's 3 names there. We'll try to remember those. In other words, you're with Ian Kilgore.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and I'll bet you that no one knew that. So there is a parks plan in the works, and it's really important that we know that, because we use a lot of the trails systems within our city boundaries, and not only that, we want to be updated on how we are growing our city, environmentally as well as socially and economically. So I think that's really important. So Joanne, away you go. If you want to share screen, I'll do that. Is it Bryan or you?
Bryan is the guy.
Okay, Bryan. So I'll make Bryan co-host so he can share the screen.
That'd be great.
Okay. If you have any questions, that I think it's going to take, how long will it take, Bryan, to go through the presentation? About 20 minutes?
Yeah, I can't see us actually being more than 15 minutes.
Okay, good. And then we can open to questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to make sure everybody's muted, and then you'll have to unmute again. And Joanne. Oops. Okay, go ahead and unmute, please, Bryan and Joanne.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Harriet. Councillor Brousseau. So what we're going to be doing today is I was able to communicate with Jim Scott, which was the consultant that did the work for us for our Parks Master Plan yesterday, and he was able to share with me our presentation that went to council last night. I'm going to do my best to take us through that presentation. Will be about 15 minutes. It shouldn't be too long. And like Harriet said at the beginning, we'll definitely open it up to questions and comments and some other pieces at the end. As I'm going through, Councillor Brousseau, if you see that I'm missing something, or if there's a little bit of a gap, or you have some inside knowledge, by all means, please add to that. And I'm just going to get my screen set up, and then we'll get going.
Okay, Bryan, I'm going to ask people, you can put your questions in the chat, or just jot them down, and we'll open the questions when the presentation is finished.
Perfect. Can everyone see that?
You might want to go full screen if you really want to see it well.
We're good, Harriet? You can see that fine?
I can see it really well. Yeah, it's great.
So there are three components to the Parks Master Plan when this presentation is going forward. So what is the Parks Master Plan is what we're going to be covering. The primary Parks Master Plan components, so what's going to be able to make up the master plan. And then we're looking at the master plan implementation at the end. So what you see in this slide right here is like the breakdown of what our existing park neighborhood structure is. So you'll see that we have it broken down into the components that a lot of you probably have seen across the way. We have our Airport Heights, Cedar Heights, Laurentian, Circle Lake area, Old City, the downtown, Pinewood, and our West Ferris area.
I like that map.
Yes, it lays it out very well.
It's really, that'll be great for Clean Green Beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. And this is what our breakdown is of our current inventory of parks that we have across our municipality right now. So you see right now that we have 27 neighborhood parks, 8 district parks, and 24 citywide parks. And when you break all that down, we're looking at 15.5 hectares per 1,000 people within our area. So what is the Parks Master Plan? So the Parks Master Plan is basically what we're looking at as an evaluating of the existing services that we have within our municipality, work with the residents and work with the different program service providers in order to develop and improve off the existing framework that we have right now. So the master plan will have a vision-based, a rationalized and classified series of parks facilities conforming to networks and phased approach to realize that vision that we have here. So in the previous slide, we had the breakdown of just what our parks network was. This is a little bit more specified into the breakdown of those parks. As you can see, these are the general pieces that we have across the board. One thing that was identified, there's a couple different highlights across the way when we were looking at the breakdown. One of the pieces was the splash pad. We have one splash pad within our community. It was identified, and when they go through these pieces, they like to look at the ratio of unit per thousands of population. And you'll see right now with that highlighted, we're looking at 1 to 51,000. And that might seem high, it is high, but we do have such a vast area of waterfront area that we can utilize and we have access to. So when you put that into consideration, it brings that down. So the need for another splash pad is probably not something that we would look at in the future just because of the accesses that we have currently to our waterfront areas. The next one is skateboard parks. And that's something that was identified as a high ratio as well that needed to be identified. We do know that there are certain areas that are going to be developed, and there's a slide later on in our presentation that's going to show where maybe potential areas for some of those pieces to go into. But when you look into Greater Sudbury, we're looking at 1 to 16,000, and we as North Bay are looking at 1 to 51,000. So that's something that needs to be identified. It was identified, and we can start to grow that. Next one is basketball courts. Harriet, you alluded to it at the beginning of our piece that we have a brand new multi-use court that's down at the waterfront. That's fantastic. It's going to be amazing. And this is what's going to bring our ratio down a little bit, but it also doesn't fix the problem where we have different pockets within the community that need to have basketball courts in there for public use and for programming use as well. Same thing with beach volleyball courts. We have great beach volleyball courts down at the waterfront. We also have some that are up near where the multi-use court is right now. But that's something that needs to be brought down. We're looking at a 1 to 25,000 ratio, and that's something that needs to be addressed as well. And then we have tennis courts, and tennis courts is another one that's a little bit of an interesting one. We have our Granite Club that does exceptional work when it comes to the tennis club, and it's something that is not really identified as a public space because it is an individual entity. But they do provide amazing tennis courts and services. And I'm sure at some point, we'll look to work with them on a little bit more higher level and make sure that we deliver more tennis courts within our community. So through the process, the consultant went through and looked at obviously the census and the breakdown of our municipality. And this is basically just a whole bunch of numbers that's going to break down what our population base is right now based off our last census and what's in here. We do know that over the past year and a half, we've started to grow, which is a great thing for us. We have more enrollments in school. We have more businesses that are starting to come around. So the focus of council has been to grow our community, and it's something that Councillor Brousseau and the rest of the mayor and the rest of the councillors have been focused on, and we're starting to see that kind of growth. And with that growth comes, more services that need to be coming out to the public and enhance those services. And this is kind of a breakdown of just those areas across the municipality when we look at it, Airport Heights, Cedar Heights, Circle Lake, all those, and just what that population breakdown is. So the primary master plan components. So in order for us to move forward with identifying the components that need to be addressed and we need to look at across the way, the consultant was able to communicate and connect with various parts of the community. So the first part was community survey. So this is an online survey that went out. Obviously, COVID was a factor in play when it comes to communicating and connecting as best we can with the population. So they started out with a community survey. So there was an online one. It was looking at trying to find what types of activities residents wanted and were interested in to have within their parks facility and what was preferred to them. And then we got into an activity programmer survey. So these were service providers that are working within our park structure that are providing services in there, connecting with them, finding out the exact same information, looking at their participants, their relationships to the parks that we have within our piece, and all that was done online as well. And then we met with our stakeholders. The stakeholders are the user groups that are working within those pieces. So that could be the badminton clubs, baseball, lawn bowling, pickleball, skateboarding people, anybody within the soccer and the softball community as well, and actually the sport tourism piece as well. So working with those stakeholder sessions, we wanted to do interviews, meetings. I believe, Harriet, that was probably when you met with Jim, is to go through those pieces and look at how we can better support from a parks perspective, all those programming aspects that are happening within the community. And then we did some community work sessions, and this was again online. COVID was a great unfortunate timing for us to be able to connect and do those work sessions in person, but with the gift of technology, we were able to still continue with those work sessions. And they were conducted to residents to discuss just the level of service requirements within their parks that they wanted to have. This was in all those areas that were identified in the slide previous when we break down the components of our municipality when it comes to airport and the old city, West Ferris, making sure that we kind of identify all those areas and then try to find out what service requirements we want to have within those parks for those networks. So out of those meetings, there were some key findings that were across the board. In this slide, I'll leave it up here for a minute. These were some of the key moments or ideas that kind of came out of it. I'll give you guys just a second just to look through them. There's quite a few, obviously, ideas. There was a lot of, I guess, participation from the public on what they would like to see, which is great. This is how we kind of go through that process. But I'll leave it up there for 2 seconds just for people to take a peek at.
Bryan, were all those ideas incorporated in this plan? I'm just curious.
Those ideas were taken into consideration. Obviously, there's going to be ones that are going to be feasible during this 20-year process, and there's going to be other ones that are going to be a little bit more of a pie in the sky that we need to look at in the future. But these were all the pieces that were taken into the big ideas of what we want to look at from our park structure moving forward. So having said that, so through the survey process and through the consultation process, the top 5 park activities that were identified throughout this were cycling, camping, hiking, swimming, and walking. So you can see, and I know that Harriet, that's again that you mentioned that it's at the beginning that your walking group, that was something that was obviously identified. 77% of the participation wanted to have enhanced or identified within our walking trails, and our linear parks is what we call them, and how they connect into the parks that are across our municipality. This is the top 7 desired activities that came out of the survey. These were done with the online survey and the community consultation. One thing that probably stands out for some of you right now would be archery. It's something that came up last night in our council meeting as well.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a funny one, and I think Jim, the consultant, alluded to it, that sometimes during the process, we're doing online surveying. There's a lot of different people that would participate. Obviously, they were an active group in that online survey, and they would bring it up. It doesn't mean that there's not maybe a space for this or an idea for this going forward in the future, but for it to be into that, the 15%, that's quite high for that kind of population of people. But it is something that needs to be identified and moving forward, and we have to take seriously when we look at developing our parks when we move forward. Some of the other interesting pieces obviously was art. The rock climbing was another one that was an interesting one. I know that it's a specific area for some people. Some people do enjoy it. It's not something that you typically see in some of your municipal parks. It's usually something that's done through specialty groups and that, but it is something that we'll consider when we move forward with how we develop our parks. So in this next slide, so we're looking at the park classification. So this is what when we go through the process of identifying how we're networking and how we're overlaying into the municipality, making sure that we provide as many park structures as we possibly can to the population of the city of North Bay. So the first one that we go into is neighborhood parks. So those neighborhood parks are typically, the quick walk or a quick bike ride from those parks, giving access to those the people within that area. We're looking at 650 meters, give or take a little bit, from your door to the access into the park. Inside those neighborhood parks, typically it's a play structure of some sort. We're looking at seating and some shade, court space within those park areas. And then we have a community park, and this is something that is typically a little bit bigger. We're looking at something that's going to be 25-minute walk, 15-minute bike ride, which is 2K from your front door and get access to that park. So that's play structures, multi-use activity space, seating, on-street parking, some of those kind of pieces that go into it. And that's something we'll get into it a little bit later on, but that would be, when we go back to a few slides and we look at where our multi-use courts are right now. Our multi-use courts, we have one that's going in right now. That's, it's something that's kind of weak when it comes to our park pieces. We're gonna have to look at enhancing that in order for us to have a community park that has those amenities in it for the population. And then we get into regional parks. And this is something that is you're willing to drive for, you're willing to move for, you're willing to go that extra little bit of distance to get to it. Pieces like that would be our waterfront. It would be the escarpment trails. It would be pieces like that. Large gatherings. These are areas that you want to get to outside of the community or in different parts of the community that you're willing to move for. They could include multi-use courts. Again, they could have walking trails. Obviously, they're going to have some seating and some shade, parking, and this use specific facilities. So again, this is the network breakdown. It's not as colorful and fancy as the first slide, but this kind of gives you an idea of the overlay of the street structure, as well as just the geographical area across the municipality and how it breaks down into those areas. So this is the Cedar Heights and what's inside of that area, what we're looking at right now. So we're looking at, open space parks, we're looking at linear parks and how they connect each other across the board. Airport area is the exact same thing. You can start to see where there's going to be potential gaps or things that need to be improved along the way. And that's what's being identified through this master plan, is that as we go through those specific areas and making sure that we address those concerns within that pocket of the neighborhood. Then we have the Laurentian Circle Lake area. And this is the old city area. So we're looking at, the connection of linear parks and how we get into it. It goes into our active transportation master plan as well about how we can connect different parts of the area into these parks and how they can actively get there, not through just using our trails network, but also with our city transit. And this is the West Ferris area. You know, this is a vast area. Obviously, there's a lot of growth that's going to be going in there. We're looking at Steve Omichel Sportsplex and the different options that can go into that area and how we can connect the Steve Omichel Park and the Lavasse Park as well. There's a comment last night, I believe it was from Councillor Vrayrosh, about some of the historical pieces that could be identified through there and making it into a little bit more of a destination and an education piece of it, and how we can connect those pieces based on obviously some of the original founders of the area coming through, and utilizing that trail network just to kind of do a little bit of a historical piece, but also be active and have an interactive park. Though that park would be something that would be bookend with potential of 2 play structures on either end, making a destination for families and for intergenerational use. And this is the rural area that's outside of the major areas. This is, we're looking at Black Forest Park, 4 Mile Lake Playground. We're also looking at the Lavasse Portage Conservation Area as well. So on the last one, we're looking at the master plan implementation. So this is obviously something that is going to be a long process. We're looking at this master plan as something that's going to be, you know, guiding us for the next 20 years. So, you know, phase 1 is the establishment of the administrative platforms. And what we're meaning by that is we're just trying to make sure that we have a mandate in order for us to implement this 20-year master plan, and that staff can now take this master plan and start using that as a guide to get us through over the next 20 years to identify some of those gaps, and moving forward and try to grow those park areas across the municipality over that time. So in this one, you'll see is the as we do the linear park piece of it. So this is part when I alluded to it before with the active transportation master plan, is how we connect those parks through the current active transportation network that we have. So this is something that we'll be taking into consideration as we start to grow those parks and start to add different pieces to them. We want to make sure that we do have access to those across the board. As we grow, you know, and we're looking at areas within the municipality that we can grow, there's certain specific areas that have been identified. You'll see in this one right now that we're looking at those 4 different pockets as potential areas for us to grow in the future. Whether or not this is going to grow over the next 20 years is obviously, it's all dependent on how our municipality grows when it comes to population and development. But having said that, you know, we're looking at these 4 different pockets. We're looking at the radius within that community, and then breaking down within that, the radius of that community is the neighborhood radius of those parks. And then we're looking at within there is the trail corridor in order to connect those parks and making sure they're identified across as those pockets start to be developed from our planning department. Then we're looking at phase 2, which is our program platform. So through those, the design and delivery of the programs that place attention on the park use. So right now, this is our current inventory and how it looks across the board. We have our 11 parkettes, we have our district parks, we have our citywide parks, our neighborhood parks, and then our unclassified parks would be something that is just generally just being used. It's not something that we have identified or we're doing any maintenance on. And then we have our to be determined district parks, and then we have neighborhood parks. If we continue through the process of this master plan over the next 20 years, this is what it would look like at the end of it. So this is what we're looking at and how things would overlap in order to bridge some of those gaps. So if we go back to the slide before, you see that there's, you know, a little bit of white in between some of those parks and how they're not overlapping. And then as we start to grow and we start to evolve and change within our parks, now we're starting to see how things kind of overlap, and we're starting to, you know, connect with the public and give them what they need within that area and give them access to these outdoor spaces that we live in the most beautiful community that we have in the north. And we need to highlight and get people out to use those kind of pieces. And by following this parks master plan, this is the kind of thing that we'll see, is that there's going to be an overlap of those services.
Can you go back to the previous slide just for a moment?
Sure.
Okay.
You good, Harriet?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then network anchors, we're looking through the renovation of specific park sites that we currently have. So this is on this shot right here, we can see what our current, what our potential inventory will be as we move forward. If I'll bring your focus to the waterfront area. So we're looking at, splash pad. We have our multi-use courts that are going to be down there, and that's how it's going to be positioned across the municipality. You'll notice that there are potential for multi-use courts in different various areas of the community. There's half courts. There's going to be identified areas for skating and for shinny hockey in our outdoor rinks, as well as the development of our current play structures at every one of those locations. So in this slide, it's the same thing. So this is identified with the access to cycling and to walking and to hiking, and how those overlap into our network when it comes to our linear trails, and making sure that people have access into those pieces. Lake access was something that came up last night in discussion as well, especially with people in the West Ferris area, because there is a lot of access down that way, and making sure it's being highlighted. So Jim is going to be going back and making sure that we kind of word that language a little bit stronger in order for it to be identified in there, is to continue to keep those lake access points open for the pockets of the community that can access from their homes right to the waterfront. And then we're looking at the realigning of the community and neighborhood park network. As we start to grow, we want to make sure that we realign how the network is and how it overlaps into specific communities. So sorry, to go back to this one here. So you can see where our current neighborhood parks are and how they overlap, and where potentially there could be some room for growth or development within those parks in order to, shorten up that distance. If we go back to one of the first slides that I had out there, we're looking at, 650 meters from your front door to one of these neighborhood parks. So we want to make sure that we address those as we move forward. And then community parks is the same thing, like it's a little bit of a bigger one. We're looking at roughly 1,000 meters to get to these community parks. So, and in this slide, we'll be able to look at, this is what our existing is, and then how are we going to grow off that, make sure that we have those community parks across the municipality. And then obviously now we're getting into regional parks, and this is what we have. We have amazing regional parks. We have, places where people come from outside of our area in order to come in and utilize these parks. It's a destination for some people. It's part of our sport tourism and getting people to come and enjoy the area that we have. Now moving forward, so we want to move forward with this. We're looking at the evaluation of the the programming that we have, and then looking at the direction that we need to go as a community moving forward. So in order for us to, I'll go back to that slide before. So moving forward, just give me 1 second here. So as we're looking at the implementation, we know that it's going to be all dependent on how our community grows and how we move forward with it. Using this master plan, it's going to allow city staff in order for us to kind of guide us through that. We have identified through our process of doing the parks master plan that the consultant was just amazed with the cleanliness, the design, the condition of our parks, and he spoke to that last night at council, that he was mightily impressed with our parks department and how they've utilized the parks that we have and how we maintain them. We do know that there's going to be constraints as we move forward when it comes to identifying where funds need to go in order to grow those different neighborhood parks. We have it as part of our capital plan moving forward over the next 10 years, that we have certain parks that need to be refurbished or redesigned, and that's where we're going to use those pieces going forward. But this parks master plan is going to allow us to guide us, and we're not going to be doing it kind of shooting from the hip. We're going to be able to utilize this plan and be able to guide us through that process. And that's the presentation. Joanne, did I miss anything?
I think the one thing you said, what's the one after your neighborhood park?
Community parks?
Yeah, I think you said 1,000 meters. I think it's 2,000 meters.
Is it 2,000? Sorry.
I thought it's 2,000. Yeah.
Well, I'm very impressed with this presentation, by the way.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you? But I have a lot of questions, and I think you probably have some too. So I'll start it off if that's okay with everyone. Is there any thought to these parks, especially the neighborhood parks, being I don't remember all the terms, being intergenerational. There are parks out there that are very passive. They're just grass. And they're not being used, you know, to their full, to what their full potential. And, you know, you have to have a welcoming space that encourages, age-friendly neighborhoods. So any thoughts on that, Bryan?
So it was identified last night, and Joanne, you can help me out with this as well. I think it was Councillor Tanya Braybosch that brought that up when it wasn't really clearly identified. And Jim Scott, the consultant, was, he admitted that it was not something that was identified. It was something that was taken into consideration during the creation of the master plan. He utilized our age-friendly action plan to help design that and to kind of go through that. But it wasn't something that he had keyed in on. So he was going to go back and do some tweaking and do a little bit of work to make sure that's identified across the board. There's multiple opportunities across all these different parks in order for us to have intergenerational programming and access points. And I think that he's going to try to, kind of add that in there in order to enhance it.
Yeah, I also noticed there are the age ranges where one was 40 to 64, and that was, I forget, a large number. I can't remember what it was, 34% or something. And then it was 65 and up was 20%. But that's not the way we define older adults these days. It's more like 55 or 50 even, 50 and up. So that would change that range, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's important because it kind of looks like, because I think the age range that we hear often is 30% in North Bay, 25 to 30% for mature adults. And I'm using that word because I think senior connotates fragility. And by the look of the pickleball population, that's not true.
Just to speak to that, Harriet. So I found that fascinating as well. I obviously being someone that's involved with our age-friendly action plan within the arts, culture, and recreation here. I found that fascinating that we're looking at a 50% population 40 plus. Really, when you look at it, and that's something that kind of stood out to me. And I get that we're usually in that 55 plus is what we identify as an older adult within the municipality, and a lot of other municipalities look at that across the board. But I take that in a little bit of a grain of salt because we're looking at a 20-year plan, right? So those 40-year-olds that are identified in that are going to be in that kind of thing by the end of this action plan. So I was kind of taking it as, it's not identified right today as in 2021, 55 plus as an older. I was looking at the continuation of that generation getting into the adult population.
Okay. And one of the areas that we use a lot in town is the Laurentian Marsh area. And that brought up to mind that are we losing any parks through this plan? Laurentian Marsh is really, the community there maintains that area. And they do, it is really a neighborhood park area. It's quite well managed. And I would hate to see us lose that, that's for sure. And I wanted to point out also, Bryan, that there are, last year, through COVID, we identified at least, I think, 25 to 30 trails that are maintained by community members. Not just the municipality. And I think that's a wonderful partnership, So I just wanted, if you ever want to see my list, I'd love to give it to you.
Yeah, we have it's something that we it's a unofficial, trail list, right? And park list. So it's something that our parks department is aware of. We're out, we're doing things, we identify those areas. So we know that they're going on, and they're typically it's the passionate people within that neighborhood that are looking after those, right? Or they've been there forever. Right? They've just been and it's just part of that neighborhood. As you move in, you're like, oh, there's a trail here, and you kind of you utilize it as best as you can. To go back to your first comment about losing parks, there's no way that we'll be looking at losing any parks over the next 20 years. If anything, we'll be looking at the potential of growth. Sorry, Joanne, go ahead.
No, just one thing that was mentioned last night is that we have more parks than the regular, what's expected out of the community for the population base. But what was decided is we're not losing those parks, that some of the parks that are not as active or active right now are going to become more natural green spaces for a while. And maybe once a subdivision develops in that area, there's more population in that area, then it will become, the city staff will put priority on it and develop it as a park relating to the people living in that area, or what the taxpayers want. So they'll go back to the community and ask that, and identify what kind of park it's going to be. So that is for me a really good strategy of not selling off land and then in 10 years having to buy something back in the can because it's already overpopulated.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, natural. I was wondering if there's any consideration of, and this may not concern the municipality, but of Canadore and Nipissing having an adult playground. Do you know what I mean?
That's a really interesting one, Harriet. That's the first that I've heard of that, and thank you for sharing that. That's going to be my new thing today that I'm going to take home tonight and think about.
All right.
I've never really thought of that way, right? Like typically when we think of playgrounds, we think of that 0 to 12 kind of range, and then we have a teenage area where it's a different kind of playground or activity area. That's really fascinating. I think have you mentioned that to the Canada Village project, like to Michelin?
Not yet, but I do want to tell you the fitness center at Lee Park. There's a adult fitness center there. Well, the kids use it too.
Yeah.
Our group, Women 10, used it last September, and I posted the video, and it got, I forget, it was a huge number, 600,000 hits. All over, and people contacted me from Texas and all over the place asking, how do we get one of those? And it made me think that, playgrounds and beautiful spaces have the ability, it's a ripple effect of those spaces to create social connection. And that's how we build strong communities, where we get to know our neighbors. And to me, that's what the playgrounds are really, and trails are vehicles for connection. And I'd love to see an adult playground. I know they exist. So that goes past pickleball and tennis and all of those things,
I'm fascinated with the idea, Harriet. I'm absolutely fascinated with that idea.
Okay. But I thought Canadore and Nipissing would be great. There's a lot of space up there, or even the hospital. That would be great to have something like that. But,
sorry, just you brought up a point. You just got me thinking about it. So as we look at developing those park areas, and I think Joanne kind of chatted about it as well too, that we we're going to be reaching out to the community and doing our own internal connection with that pocket of the community to find out what they would like to have within it. So if we're looking at neighborhood parks, obviously it's going to be within that geographical area that we're looking at connecting with them, finding out with what they want within that area as we design it. And then when we look at a regional one, which this adult park seems like it'd be more of a regional kind of piece to it, it's something that we would look at as connecting with people that are here to find out what they would like to have within those parks, and then we would take that into consideration as we develop and design it.
Okay. Any questions, anyone? I have one more, and that was about what the infill in the city, like good planning. And Ian taught me this, is you do infill first, and then you move out into the community. So how are we with that infill, using the spaces that are in our not in even the city boundaries, inner city, are we getting those spaces filled up?
You mean on a residential building?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I tell you right now, one of the projects that was about to go to vote, probably at the next council, is the Brook Street project, where there's going to be an apartment building, 41 units, small units for a geared to income. So that's next to the old, in the yard of the old McDougall School. There's a potential project going at the end of Bain Drive, or at the bottom of Bain Drive, that will be, I believe, if it goes ahead, like 60 units. There's also, well, Sugar Bush area is being developed a lot. There's a lot of subdivisions and projects coming up for that. There's another apartment building behind Thompson Street, which is off Lakeshore. Thompson Street is a street on the right that just goes to the lake, but on the left, it was just like 50 feet long. Now they're extending it, and it's going to be a whole subdivision. They're starting with two apartment buildings that are condos, and then behind part of that land that they own will also after that be houses, a mixture of houses. I think that's about all that I've seen since I'm on council that hasn't started. Do you know of any, Brian? That's not really Brian's department.
No. Well, that's
Sorry, Joanne.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, Joanne knows a lot more than I do about that. Sorry,
Okay.
that's not really something that I'm in tune with.
Brian is in the play department.
Exactly, right. Yeah, the fun department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna, okay. Comments here on the chat. I was happy to see the dolphin back in Lee Park. We don't have very many public sculptures in North Bay, but hopefully Clean Green Beautiful is going to help change that picture along with creative industries and your arts. What do you call it? The arts. Arts,
group? Culture, and recreation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the pickleball courts, where are they going to be?
They're going to be at Bork Playground off Beatty Street. 10 courts, correct, Brian?
Yes, that's correct.
10 courts, so that's quite exciting.
Are they're open courts, right? Like
Yes.
they're not covered or anything like that.
No, open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so another comment, something to think about. Many grandparents take little ones to parks. Could there be a bench or two for a quick sit and maybe swings with a bit wider seat for older adult bottoms?
That's Brian's age friendly.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think that's a great comment. You know, that's something that we're trying to develop and grow. We just went through a bench program this summer where we were trying to identify some of the gaps. We installed 13 new benches this summer in order to try to just, you know, to shorten the distance between our parks and going along our linear parks, which is our trail networks, as well as our transit areas, in order to try to, you know, bridge that gap where we do have benches that we can install or go there. I know that it's something now that as we redevelop and we look at, you know, creating our new parks, it is something that's being taken into consideration, is that we need to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of benches in order for older adults to be able to go there for the intergenerational opportunities with their grandkids. Even for some adults that are younger that just want to be able to sit, relax, and be able to enjoy what their kids are doing. It's something that needs to be identified and needs to be addressed within there. So it's something on our radar for sure.
Okay, another question. What is happening to the old, I think you meant Civic Site, right, Anne? Yeah, the Civic Site.
The Civic Site is still, I think it will take maybe a year or so before it comes to start to the construction of it. It is the people that originally came in with the plans and then were stopped by residents and had to go to the Ontario Municipal Board are now, that is over with, and they will be ready to build. It's just been delayed by, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. It will be built, and I believe it was a series of semis and small homes in that area, which I'm anxiously waiting for, because it's going to put life back into that neighborhood. And who will not want to buy one of those if you're a pickleball participant, right? Just
There you go, John.
And you play pickleball
Right down the road.
right down the road.
Yeah. How about the Kenrock site? What's happened? Is there any movement there for those those I guess they're condominiums?
Condos. Yeah, I believe the project is ready to go, and I don't know when. I think that they're supposed to start promoting and marketing and trying to start selling some of the units before they actually start digging. But it has never been. We've never had a project on that site that has gone this far, and we do know it's going to get built. I'm not sure if it's a year or two down the road that you'll see construction happening there, and it's pretty neat building that hopefully everybody will get to see the sunset.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Any questions? I have one other, it's maybe a comment, and as usual, that this is really enlightening. I got to tell you, what do you think, everyone? Like it really great information. And once again, and that's the hardest part, I guess, is to get the word out. The communications piece is always the last. And I wish the whole community knew this, because we've been through a hard year and a half here with COVID. And this is very, very inspiring and hopeful, wouldn't you say, everyone?
Yeah.
It's great news, but we need, if there's one thing I'd like to see, a better way of communicating this kind of information to our community. We'll spread the word. We're good at that. and we can also, if you get permission, Bryan, to share this recording out, I can send it to you first if you want to review it, and get permission from the municipality to share this out, because we have a good following and we can get the word out too, because this gives us hope in our community, I think. So any questions, any comments?
One of the things I just want to summarize, which I had, we talked about one of the, if you all know where Police Playground is, I thought it was Bork Playground, but it's not. It's behind on Stone, behind the church up on the hill on Castle, up on the rocks. So that's Police Playground. So they're going to get a new play structure there. There's going to be a new play structure, seating and shade at the Milford Crescent Park, which I didn't even know existed. So you have to look at a map, kind of like behind the Mazda dealership. Of course, the new pickleball courts at Burke, new dog park at Thompson Park. And that's going to be exciting too. So they want to have one more central. So where the skate park is right now, they're going to move that eventually to the all-wheel plaza at the waterfront, which will have a pump track, and this be also used for the skate park. So then that area of Thompson Park will become a dog park. So that'll be nice that not all of the traffic has to go down Premier to go let their dogs loose and let them run. And then Bellevue Park, which is in the Thibault Terrace, they're looking at seating and shade structures. And of course, there's going to be Bryan did show it, but I don't know if you caught it, full basketball court and ball hockey surface at Circle Lake, and I believe a full or a half at Veronica Park. So those are all add-ons that come out of this study. So no, we're not losing. We're kind of reshaping the vessel. That's the story of my life in the last 5 years, same vessel, cargo ship. So we're shifting stuff around depending on what the municipality, the neighborhoods are morphing to, right? Because we're aging and that is great. And if you ever want a presentation on the age-friendly action plan, Bryan is the city expert on that one. If one day you ever want to learn more about that and want to have some neat comments like adult parks, that was really
Absolutely,
good.
Bryan,
I'm going to run with that one too. That is a really good idea. It's the best idea of today.
Yeah.
So thank you for inviting us. And do you want to add something, Bryan?
No, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to come in here and do the presentation. So thank you very much for that, Harriet. I love the questions, love some of the comments. It's always good to get that word to be spread across the different pockets of the community. So, I do agree with you that, we have all these beautiful pieces, and I think Johanne kind of talked to it as well, that all these beautiful pieces that we need to get that word out there of the different things that they can do within the community and how we can promote that. It is something that was identified in the master plan as this, a communication strategy to a certain degree in order to get those pieces out there to the public and let everybody know that this is what we have, go out and use them and how to use them. So it is something that you will start to see a little bit better communication strategy moving forward with that. But again, thanks for letting us come in and chat with you today. It's been a great.
We have two more questions.
Yeah.
Okay. We have, is the Kerr rink being rebuilt? Very well used surface.
To my knowledge, yes, it is. I'll have to look into that.
I don't know where that is. Where is that?
So Kerr, geez, I have
Lavaz,
yes.
Riverbend Road.
On Riverbend Road.
Riverbend Road, yeah. So From what I
One of the-
understand, it is. I'll have to speak with our Parks Department to see if they've had some plans or some design pieces with it. I know that we've gone through over the past few years some, reshaping the boards and the design of some of the outdoor rinks that we have. So I'll need to connect them to confirm, but I can see that being rebuilt.
Yeah, and they talked about last night too of the Kerr Park, that eventually they want a trail from Kerr Park to Michelle to Champlain. So
Oh, okay. Nice.
even if your older kids are playing soccer or whatever, mom could venture out and walk the trail to Kerr Park, and there's supposed to be, I think, eventually maybe a play structure there too. So yeah, there is a future plan for Kerr Park.
So there's another question, Bonnie Bolger.
Okay, I was just wondering if the city council has committed funds to expanding all of the ideas you have, or are you just got your maintenance money and then you're going to stick a few dollars in here and there? Because it's great on paper unless you're going to really commit. I don't know that it's kind of nice to see kind of what projects you're actually going to get done.
I do know from the capital budget that they're going to get, once it's approved, so at next council meeting, I'm assuming it's going to get approved, then they take off running with all of this. And I do know, like, you've seen some of the buildings and washroom having a new look, like at Amelia Park and at I call it Lands and Forests, that's my old days, Armstrong or Olmsted Park. So those have been allocated one every 2 years and one every 2 years of our parks has been redesigned. And that's where they're going to plot money every 2 years. We're going to work on one specific park for the next 20 years. And it's going to come down the road and we're going to see it because as a council, we only look at the 10-year plan, but these guys will implement all of that so that it will come down the pipe as the years advance. So good question, Bonnie.
And one more question. Has any thought been given to inviting high school students' input into this development or art structures? They are our future.
I think that's a great question. I know that connecting with high school students is always a challenge, but it is something that needs to be identified. I do agree 100%. They are the future. So they are the ones that are coming up and being able to utilize the structures that we're building. As we do, connection with the community and we look at, any kind of, consultation or facilitation of growth, we're going to be having to connect with those populations in order to get their comments and their concerns and make sure they're addressed within the Parks Master Plan. I don't believe that through this process that it was identified that high school students were communicated or connected with. I'm sure that some of those, ideas and thoughts were, conveyed through, parents and through other groups, user groups for that example, to get to the Parks Master Plan, but it's something we'll definitely have to consider as we move forward.
Yeah. So we have about 7 minutes left. Brian, I do have one last comment to make about, I've had a few, I guess, about transportation, and that has to be for the older adult population. That is going to be a real big issue. What does that look like? Many people as they age, especially, they will be giving up their vehicles. So they need to rely on a really great age-friendly transit system. And that, I think, has to be considered when we're doing this parks plan too. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree. It was identified in our age-friendly action plan as well, right? Is to grow that and to change that. We're making strides and changes to, scheduling and access points and different pieces like that, and making sure that we try to do that. It's going to be an ever-evolving, challenge in order for us to grow that. There's a lot of, hiccups and challenges along the way in order for us to make our transit system work better for the pockets of the population. It's something that I've been working with manager of transit, Drew Prowetta, and making sure that he understands, what we're looking at from an age-friendly neighborhood, and make sure that we understand, there's different areas that need to be addressed and need to be looked at maybe a little bit differently than other parts, just because of, the pockets of the community that are aging differently than others. So, it's on his radar. It's something that he's utilizing in order to try to grow his transit strategy in order to meet those kind of pieces. But it's going to be an ongoing challenge for us, is to grow that and make sure that we address it.
He's going to be a guest in November
Yeah.
on, actually, Joanne, and you bumped him today. He was supposed
Yeah,
to.
Oh, no.
I
I
trump.
hope Drew doesn't know that.
We're actually going to go, and then after his presentation, we're going on a bus ride.
That's fantastic. I think that's great.
You know, you gotta have the experience, right?
Yeah.
And I don't need to pump Drew's tires, but Drew is fantastic. He's very knowledgeable. He's also, he's a very innovative thinker. So he does take comments, he does take questions, he does take those pieces and brings them back and tries to grow. He wants to make our transit system the best that it possibly can. So the more comments he gets and the more feedback he gets, I know that he takes that seriously and will try to utilize it within his system.
And
Okay, one last question. Are you looking at multi-use areas, skateboarding in summer, area in winter with a cover like Bonfield? Anywhere?
So to my knowledge, that hasn't been identified. It wasn't identified as any outdoor covered area. Joanne, maybe you might have a little bit of background with that. I haven't seen anything
No.
come through with that.
I do know that it's way in the works that we're talking about maybe covering some tennis courts, but that's not at this term, and not, I don't know, maybe 5 years from now or about, if it happens. Again, like, you know, the city of North Bay always likes to work with a partnership with community associations or community clubs. We want to enhance and help, and instead of duplicating, and North Bay is not big enough to have the city and clubs competing against each other. We just help each other out. So far, the conversation has started. I believe it's a positive conversation, and it will end with something concrete that you will be able to enjoy, and that might be the beginning of things. Besides that, that's about all. For Drew, one of the great things that we just added to his toolbox is the dynamic dispatch, because now it's all you can option to more data is computerized, so he has more lifetime data to know exactly what areas are requiring more pickups and that. And it's not just by what the driver is telling him, it's actually monitored through a computer system, which is great. So he's going to do wonders with that data.
I don't know if everybody knows, but Drew Poeta is not only well qualified to be the director of transit, he actually drove the bus. He drove the buses for I don't know how long. So he's got that on, what do you call it, on the boots on the ground experience to understand. And I'm just really excited to have him on. So
and what he also did is he moved to another city for a few years and worked in their system with the intention of coming back to North Bay. So he's got he has a plan. So he's going to be interesting.
So we're going to close, but I have to say a huge thank you to both of you. Keep up the great work you're doing on our behalf. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And let's communicate. Let's keep those doors open and communicate with each other so we know what's happening. We'll spread the word too. And thank you again, Bryan. I will have you back to talk about age friendly, because
I would love to.
We're heavily involved with the village right now. So there's lots to discuss for sure.
Absolutely. I would love to do that.